All right, Jeff Zimmerman here. I am honored to have the legendary Jackie Kallen, uh, legendary for her role as a female boxing manager. James Lights Out Toney, Rocco McCart. She's got some current guys she's working with as well. There's so much to get into, Jackie, but the biggest news coming out, the headline is you're going into the International Boxing Hall of Fame this June. Talk about that and how excited you are.
Woohoo! I'm very excited. When I got the call, I wanted to say, "What took you so long?" But I thought, maybe that sounds a little arrogant or rude or whatever. But I was so excited just to be finally included, and being the first female boxing manager was a great honor because nobody could say they were the first because I'm the first. And it's sort of the pinnacle of my career to know that I was recognized by the men in the sport. And I don't know if there's any women that vote. I really don't even know who's on the voting committee, but it's a great honor and it's a legacy, so I'll be up there with the Mike Tysons and the Muhammad Ali's and James Toney and Thomas Hearns. And, it's a wonderful thing. I'm very, very excited.
Yeah, Jackie, and you're going in with a great class. You got the late great Diego Corrales is going in, Michael Moore, Ricky Hatton, Ivan Calderon, which I think he may be long overdue in some regards. These little guys don't sometimes get a lot of love. How excited are you to go in with this class?
It's wonderful. I love Diego. And, I've known Michael Moore since he was an amateur because he was part of the Kronk boxing team when I was there doing publicity. So we've worked together back in the 80s. And Nick Charles, who I used to, absolutely adore. And I'm just so excited. No matter who I was in with, I'd be happy. But this is a great class, like you said. So I'm just going to be so proud standing up there with them and getting the recognition along with those guys.
Well, we were talking before we got started, and my last comment to you in our interview a couple of years ago was about soon to be in the Hall of Fame. So now we're talking again, and you're almost there. A few more months.
Yep.
But listen, I told you I wasn't going to ask you the same questions on this interview, but I feel like your story needs to be told multiple times. And so you were in the music scene. You were a writer, you were a journalist, you hung around some, small names like Elvis and Frank Sinatra. You didn't just jump into the boxing business, but just talk about you were in the show business. You were in show business, and just talk about starting there and then jumping into this, small gym called Kronk in Detroit and kind of getting hooked up with a guy named Thomas Hearns, Emmanuel Steward.
Well, actually, you're right. I started out as a celebrity journalist, an entertainment journalist. Barbara Walters was my, role model. That's who I wanted to be like. And it wasn't just music. I mean, I covered the Oscars, I covered the Emmys, as well as the Grammys. So I interviewed every major actor, of course, great athletes like Magic Johnson and, Abdul Jabbar, you name the sport. And I also interviewed presidents. So my base was very wide. And then one day, our editor at the daily paper I was at, he was short an entertainment writer. A sports writer. So he came to the entertainment department and he said, "Would you want to cover sports for me? I need somebody to go down to the Detroit Tigers and interview this young pitcher called Mark Fidrich. They called him the Bird. He was from Massachusetts." And they said, "He doesn't want to do any interviews. We've tried, but we thought maybe if we sent a young girl down, he might do the interview." I was pretty young then. So I said, I'll do it. What have I got to lose? So I went down there. I waited in the, area where the players came out. And I approached him and I asked him if he would do the interview. And he was only too happy to do it. And I got a great story. And they said, "We're going to keep you around the sports department also. If you don't mind, we're going to use you if we need you from time to time." And I said, "That's awesome. I love it." So I segued into boxing, but I kept doing entertainment, but I moved into sports and specifically boxing. they sent me to interview this young fighter turning pro, Tommy Hearns, 4-round fighter. And I just fell in love with the sport. And that was it. I was in with it. And then I interviewed Emmanuel Steward and all the other fighters. At that time, there was only 2 fighters at the Kronk Gym. And in the 10 years that I was there, you can imagine how many came and went.
Mm-hmm.
So it was such a great education. And the fact that Emmanuel Steward was so open and welcoming to a female, it made all the difference in the world, because when other people saw that he accepted me and that Tommy was happy to work with me, that really helped me a great deal, because there were a lot of men in the business that had no use for me, didn't want to give me the time of day. But I kind of wormed my way into their hearts. I was nice and friendly, and I just little by little got their respect and ended up staying. It's been 45 years now. And so I kind of earned my place with all the old boys. A lot of them aren't around anymore, unfortunately.
Right.
I outlived a lot of the guys that didn't accept me at the beginning. And today's young guys, they're just much more used to women being around. So I don't have a problem at all anymore. And I learned so much, being with Emmanuel and the Kronk Gym. I learned how to wrap hands. I learned how to stop cuts. I learned how to look for different things in different fighters. Emmanuel taught me that styles make a fight. Certain guys shouldn't fight other certain guys. It's a tougher fight. And I just soaked it all up. And it was like my master's degree in boxing, so to speak. And then when I was ready to go out on my own and try to manage a fighter, I had a lot of knowledge under my belt. So when they tried to test me, which they did, I could pass the test because I really knew what I was talking about. But it took a lot of years and a lot of patience to really secure my spot in an all-male sport.
If Manny wasn't there, Jackie, is it safe to say you probably wouldn't be here today?
That's a great possibility, because he opened his gym and his heart and his, everything to me. And Tommy was absolutely great. Tommy treated me like a sister, still does. I just hung up with him about a half hour ago. We're still like brother and sister. Tommy's one of my best friends, and Milt McCrory and Hilmer Kenty and a lot of the guys that I worked with on a daily basis, we're all still very close. I talk to Bronco McCart all the time. And a lot of the fighters that I managed when I went off on my own, guys like Tarek Salmasi and, besides Bronco McCart, just Scotty Buck and, I could go on, Damian Fuller and all the guys that I worked with. We all stay in touch. Bernard Harris, they're all part of my life. So we all stay in touch. I just participated in a reunion podcast this past weekend with 7 of the guys that were on the Contender with me, with Stallone and Sugar Ray Leonard. That's back 20 years ago almost. And it was so great to see those guys again, some of whom I stay in touch with, some of whom I hadn't seen in 15, 20 years. And I just never burn a bridge. I just keep all the lines of communication open with everybody. And I think it's important in any business, any occupation that you're in, any industry, to just don't shut a door. Keep your relations clean and good so that you can go back at any time and work with the same people again. And I've just been very blessed. I've never been sued. I've never been in any kind of litigation or arbitration. And I just have had a wonderful, great run. It's over 4 decades now.
And it's not over either. That's what's so crazy. I saw the reunion post with the Contender. It's hard to believe it's been 20 years, and that was groundbreaking at the time. And getting power hitters like Stallone and Sugar Ray, as part of that. I mean, how awesome was that?
It was just so much fun, because at the time we had one dressing room for Ray and Sly and myself. The 3 of us had the dressing room. So every day we'd get up in the morning, go into our dressing room, and then wait till it was someone's turn to go on set for whatever reason. So we just sat and talked, told great stories. I just sat there and I listened a lot. I listened more than I talked, because, Ray Leonard had great stories. And of course, Sly Stallone, I mean, my gosh, all the movies he's made, the whole Rocky series, you know, and then of course the Rambo series and everything in between. It was before the Expendables. So he just had lots of great stories. And I just sat and soaked it all up. And it was just every day was a great day. It was just so much fun.
I can imagine that had to been amazing. And talk about the air, Jackie, because you know, I think the last time we talked, the Four Kings had just come out. So you were on there talking about Tommy, of course, and you know, that was the era that I fell in love with boxing. You know, that's my youth. My grandfather boxed in Chicago as an amateur, grew up. We were that house that got all the, you know, fights that all the neighbors came to, you know, growing up. And, you know, Sugar Ray was my guy. So you had Sugar Ray, Tommy, you know, Hagler, Roberto Duran. I
Durant,
mean, yeah, I mean, just legendary guys, but just, you know, when you're in the moment and you're working and you're living in it, do you even know that you're surrounded by all that greatness?
you know what? That's a great question because you don't, while you're living it, you don't know that 20, 30 years down the line, those are really historic matchups. There were 9 altogether between the 4 of them. And to be part of that, it was a dynasty. It was, there's never really been anything like that since then, where we had the best fighting the best on a rotating basis like that. It was just, it was a thrill every fight. And you never knew who was going to win. It wasn't like the fights where you know kind of it's one-sided and you sort of know who's supposed to win. Those fights were all toss-ups. You know, no one really knew who was going to win. And so it was, and even some of them were still controversial. You know, Tommy's second fight with Ray, I mean, it was a draw, but most people think Tommy won. And the fight with Hagler and Leonard, you know, you ask who won that one, and different people have different opinions on who they think won it. And it was just a beautiful golden era of boxing. You know, we had Larry Holmes as champion for so many years in the heavyweight division. And so it was always fun to go see his fights. I mean, he had such a beautiful jab. I used to study his jab and go, wow, you know, if every young fighter could jab like Larry Holmes, I mean, he just had a beautiful jab. And I just loved going to the fights back then because the fights were great, you know, Caesar's Palace and, you know, just all the celebrities that came to the fights. Every fight was like a night in Hollywood. It was just amazing. And it isn't quite like that anymore. You know, we don't have the big fights in Vegas all the time. We don't have the junkets going in with plane loads of people from someone's hometown. I mean, when Tommy fought, I used to arrange these, you know, junkets, these private planes that went in with like 150, 200 fans just going to watch Tommy. It's not like that anymore. And, you know, a lot of it has to do with the fact that we don't have boxing on network TV anymore. I mean, there's no more ABC Wide World of Sports. There's no more Friday night fights. There's more, it's like all DAZN and, you know, Pro Box and a lot of the streaming networks
Right.
that you have to pay for to get. HBO's out of boxing. Showtime is out of boxing. So it's a very different business now. And I'm not liking it as much as I did in the 80s and 90s.
I was going to ask you about the different airs and just what you thought. And yeah, it's definitely different. And as you know, Richard Steele is my boxing mentor. He's the one that got me into this business 20 so years ago. And he's going to be 80 this year, in this month, actually. So I love hearing the stories, the Hagler Hearns, you know, the Sugar Ray Hagler stories, you know, from his vantage point, you know, in the ring and you being there ringside and seeing it. It's just, it seems unreal that it even happened, you know, so long ago.
Well, I'm not far behind him. I'll be 78 in April, so I'm just a couple years behind. So,
Right.
you know, I experienced all of those same fights, those same fighters, you know, the golden era. And it was so different. You could build a fighter so much faster. I mean, James Toney, I got him his first title in 2.5 years. I've been working with the kid today, Mike Juan Williams. He's had 22 fights now. He's undefeated, but it's taken 3 times as long to
Right.
get to the point where James Toney got in 2.5 years. There just aren't as many opportunities. there aren't as many, like I said, TV dates where you can build your fighter and they get to be seen. You know, it's hard to get that national recognition for a fighter. Everything's different now. I miss the old days. And when we talk about it like this, I really miss it because you're bringing back so many great memories.
Yeah, same here. You know, it's interesting. I interviewed Teofimo Lopez a couple of years, maybe year and a half, 2 years ago. And it was when his generation was starting to make their rise, the Tanks, the Devons, the Ryan Garcia, Shakurs, and him. And so I asked him about the Four Kings, and because you started hearing some of that chatter comparing those guys to, and to his credit, he stopped me mid-question and said, basically, no, we're not even, he paid complete homage to that generation and what those guys did. And a couple of years later, they're still not fighting each other and so forth. But he was really, he's a really sharp guy. And, for him to kind of say, hey, don't even go there. We're not those guys, I thought was pretty impressive.
That is impressive because the truth is nobody has ever been able to duplicate or replicate that era. And I love it that today's fighters pay respect to those guys and say, wow, we're not there, we're not them. It's great. I think it's wonderful because the truth of the matter is it isn't like the old days. And I just don't know if we're ever going to get back to that. I mean, we have MMA, which has gotten more and more popular. They're on TV all the time. And now with TKO, the company that was formed between UFC and WWE, those two getting together are two colossal companies. And now they've got The Rock on the board there. And it's just, they're growing so fast. And boxing is just sort of stumbling along. It's not what it used to be. And that makes me so sad. I love boxing and I wish it could return to that golden age, but I don't know how it's going to. I don't know. What are your thoughts? I mean, you've talked to so many people. You must have an idea also. So I'd like to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I'm with you in a lot of ways. I think, we saw the sadness when HBO went away. Now Showtime is gone by the wayside. The streaming service, I'll give you an example. I talked to my dad, who's a big boxing fan. He's about 81, I think maybe be 82 this year. And he doesn't know boxing's even on still. Like, he's used to going into the newspaper and looking up what the LA Times and seeing when the fights are, or finding a movie to watch or things like that. And it's just a whole generation. It's just completely gone. And and then all the apps and trying to stay up with all the apps and, when the fights are on and so forth. So yeah, it'll never be like it was, unfortunately. But when it's, two great guys, being in Vegas, whether it's like a Canelo or Spence Crawford, there's still that excitement in the arena, right? I mean, there's still something to be said about it. But the people that I hang around with, Jackie, they're not boxing fans. That tells me everything I need to know.
And they probably couldn't name who's the heavyweight champion in the world, who's the middleweight champion.
No.
They don't seem to know. And what I found is the older generation, the boxing fans that came along when I came along, they don't understand this, which app do you download to do that? They're not computer savvy. They weren't born with a computer or an iPad in their hands. So if they can't just turn on their TV and go to HBO, they just say, oh, the heck with it. I don't even know those fighters anyway. So they don't really care if they watch it or not. And that's the problem is, most people don't know who the key fighters of today are. You could ask a person on the street, name a couple of fighters today, and you'd be lucky if they could name anybody. And that's not how it was in the 80s and 90s. I mean, everybody knew Mike Tyson, everybody knew James Toney, everybody knew Tommy Hearns. Just not like that anymore. I guess the last one was Floyd. Everybody knew Floyd. And ever since then, different game.
Yeah, I hear a lot of people will say they stopped watching after Mike Tyson. You get that a lot. Floyd changed the game in a lot of good ways, and then I think this generation it may have done some damage, because of everyone protecting the record and trying to be like Floyd and the Money Mayweather and all that. And, you've been around Floyd, I've been around Floyd, and no one was as dedicated as him and what he did. I remember being at his press conference in Dallas when he fought De La Hoya. 99.99% of the people, it was outside of American Airlines on the plaza, which they probably never do today, were there for Oscar. Like my wife, all his, she's Nicaraguan, her sisters, all, Hispanics lining up, 2 miles deep. Nobody knew who Floyd was at that time. And then him winning, which I still think it was a split decision, right? But that changed the game. That night changed the game.
I'll tell you what else changed the game is the Jake Pauls, the Logan Pauls, the, sort of the internet celebrity kind of people that came into the sport without a big amateur background, but with a huge social media following and are making huge paydays when the hardworking fighters that have been working at it forever are not getting the same paydays. That's kind of been a difference, I think, in boxing. And I love to see that the girls, the Amandas and the Katies, girls like Clarissa Shields, they're getting good paydays now, which is great because they didn't for a long time. So I'm happy to see that. But, everything changes and evolves, but not everything changes and evolves for the better. So, I'm just hoping that boxing comes back to its old glory. I think it's going to take more exposure. It's going to take a superstar like a Mike Tyson or somebody that's going to catch the imagination of the whole public. Is it the Paul brothers? I don't know. What do you think about them being involved?
You know what? I get asked about them a lot from friends outside of the business. And I always say this, I never knock the hustle because,
right.
Jake Paul, he's hired Shane Mosley, he's hired, BJ Flores in the past, he's hired legitimate, people, Coach Wade, training and stuff. So I feel like he's putting in the time, and I think the biggest impact is what you just mentioned, is what he's done for women's boxing. He's a savvy guy. I mean, what he's done with Amanda, especially, is incredible. So, it's interesting where, on the men's side, I think we both look at it, it's like, it's never going to be like it used to be. But then you see the women's side flourishing like never before. It's quite interesting. And I think MMA has helped the women's side quite a bit because, I think what Dana White and the UFC has done for women's MMA, I think is in some ways carried on, to what's happening in boxing, what Jake Paul is doing. So it's interesting.
Well, I agree. I think it's good for the sport because it's getting people to watch boxing again. And you may not know some of the good fighters of the day, but Jake Paul and Logan Paul, and they just do such a great job of promoting themselves that it just gets new eyeballs back on our sport. So you can't knock that.
Yeah, I was at it might have been the Spence Crawford fight in Vegas, which, as you know, nobody's there until like the co-main event, or nobody really shows up, right? And I'm there from the very first fight, empty arena. And then the week after, back in Dallas, was Nate Diaz and Jake Paul in Dallas. When I got there from the first fight, the place was practically packed. And
that's great for the undercard fighters because I always feel so bad if you're an opening fighter, for the first few fights and there's nobody there in the arena. You're fighting and there's nobody watching. And those other fights, they're packed from the beginning. So you're right. It definitely makes a difference to the psyche of the fighter if he's fighting to an empty arena or if there's people there to cheer for him.
Yeah.
Or her.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I couldn't believe how different it was, that the Jake Paul card the arena was almost full, right from the get-go. And so I think, Nate Diaz brings in the MMA fans and, kind of, it's promotional, it's, the marketing behind it. But yeah, oh man, it's interesting though. It's definitely interesting. But
Well,
the
I'm
sport's not
hoping,
dying. It's not going away. They can do all they want to try to kill it, but I don't think it'll ever go away.
that's what I'm hoping. I love the sport. I've been involved a very long time. I'm a purist. I like to see boxers box. I don't like to see when they cross over to MMA or the MMA. I like each sport to stay separate and, be the best at your sport. If you're a boxer, stick with boxing, be the best you can be. And, I'm a purist. I love the sport. I'll always love the sport. And I'm always looking for that next great champ, some fighter that's going to come along. Mike Juan Williams, who I have, is excellent. He just got a knockout last week on Pro Box against Luis Feliciano. It was a really good fight for him because he was 18-0, and Feliciano's a very good prospect. Matter of fact, Pro Box signed him to a 3-fight deal, and we knew going in we were the B side, which is not easy coming in as the underdog. But I've been in that position with a lot of my fighters, and I'm not afraid. I'm one of those. I'm not afraid to take a chance. I don't look at a fighter and say, oh, well, I don't know, he's too tall, he's too short, he's a southpaw. If I don't believe in my fighter and I don't think this is the right fight, then maybe I'm not with the right fighter, because I've taken a lot of chances with a lot of guys and they've paid off. Look at James against Michael Nunn in his hometown, 20-1
Big
underdog.
underdog, yeah.
And so I don't mind going in, as the underdog if I believe my fighter can win. And I certainly believe that Mike Juan would win. And, you have to have enough smarts and intelligence in the sport to be able to look at a matchup and sort of kind of get a good guesstimate of whether your guy has a good chance or not. You have to study who else the other guys fought, when's the last time he fought, how often does he fight, are most of his fights knockouts or decisions, are they split decisions, unanimous? I mean, if you really take the time to study an opponent, it's like handicapping a horse race. You can kind of get a good idea whether it's a good fight at the right time. And that's what I try to do. I try to handicap the fight. And, I've been pretty successful doing that. So a lot goes into choosing an opponent.
Yeah, no doubt. And going in and being the B side, when you're coming in to lose, it makes it that much more gratifying. I remember seeing Mike, well, when you guys were here in Dallas, you and Tommy came in for that private show. In fact, I was just back at that arena. Remember all the planes?
Yeah, it was like a museum, a flight museum.
Yeah, I was just there for a real estate event for my wife, with my wife, last week, in fact. So
It's a nice venue.
Yeah,
We
they
had
haven't done
we had a
anything.
really good time.
Yeah, that was fun. That was fun. But you mentioned being a purist, and nothing was more pure in the ring than James Lights Out Toney. Just and a guy that can just sit there in the pocket and and look at me trying to move, but and just counter, and just so slick and so skilled. How did, first off, Jackie, how did you guys hook up? Was it at Kronk? Did he, was that, or how did you guys come about in managing them?
How that happened was my first fighter that I was managing was a heavyweight out of Chicago, Bobby Hitz.
Bobby Hitz, right.
And he's a promoter now for many years. And Bobby and I were training at a gym, and James was there training, and his manager had been shot and killed recently at that time, and he had no manager. And I watched him spar, and I thought, oh my gosh, this kid's great, And I talked to Emmanuel about him. Emmanuel wasn't interested. So I said, well, I'm going to take him. And the rest is history. We just really bonded together. He was like a third son, because I have two sons that are his age. And the three of them just became best buddies and hung out together. And, I took James on trips with us, and, he just was like part of our family. And it was just amazing how quickly he climbed the ladder. But back then we had monthly fights. And they were on USA. So I could keep him fighting. He fought 1 year 10 times in 1 year. So we built records so fast back then. Can't do that today.
Yeah, and even back then, guys were signing up for title defenses or title fights, but then taking a fight maybe, right before that, even though they had a title fight. I think
That's
Oscar
exactly
did
what
that. Yeah.
Yep. We did that with Michael Nunn. We took a warm-up fight. Look, Michael Moore fought for a title, I think his 12th fight, Ramsey Hassan. So a fighter then took chances. Today's fighters, I find to be a little bit more pampered, a little more, maybe select in who they fight. So it takes them longer to get a title shot because they're so busy building a record, taking easy fights to keep winning. Then when they get up to the level of fighting for a title, they haven't fought anybody. So I'd rather see a fighter fight a guy 12-4 who fought 4 tough fights and lost than a guy 16-17-0 that fought nobody. Because how are you going to be the best if you don't beat the best? If you meet and greet and fight and beat mediocre talent, you're still going to be mediocre yourself.
Yeah. That goes back to the air, different air. And Mayweather fought everybody, so that's not a knock on him, I think. But the zero, the protecting, and the kind of that mentality, I think. And then you saw guys get into some real fights, and they didn't do so well. So, but
if you have a paper record that's just built up on, easy wins, you're going to get exposed somewhere down the line. So I'd rather see a guy fight some tough fights. If you lose, you lose, but you can come back. Bronco McCart lost his 7th fight. It was a lesson. He said, I'm not giving up. He came back and won the title. So you can have a loss along the way. Look at all the MMA fighters. They all have losses. It's in boxing where they say someone's must go. And it's like, you got to protect that 0. And you really don't. It's about the caliber of guys you fought. I mean, you can fight 20 lesser opponents and have a pure record, or you can be 19-1 and lose against a top-rated guy. And I'd rather have the guy that fought top talent than a guy that just fought mediocre guys his whole career.
Yeah, no doubt. And you talk about your relationship with James, and I know it's strong today. I think he just posted, before I got on this call, I was on Facebook, and he posted about you and just that family, you being, family to him. But you guys had some rocky times, during his career. Did you not? Was there some?
Yeah, back in, it's 30 years ago, so it's ancient history. But, he was young. He was passionate. He was, he was a young kid. And losing a fight like he did to Roy Jones was a tough one. And obviously, it was hard for him. And he dealt with it his own way. But we patched things up, and we're great friends now. When I see him, we go to lunch together and have a lot of things to laugh and talk about. And I post things on my Facebook about him, and he puts pictures of us on his Facebook, and nothing but respect. My only regret is that he got into the Hall of Fame before me. I wanted to get in together. I thought we should be inducted the same year, but of course it didn't work out that way. But I'm just so happy to be getting in there that we'll be in there. Our names will be in there together forever, and that's important.
No doubt, Jackie, and thanks so much for doing this. We'll wrap it up here. I'm here with Jackie Kallen. Finally got the call to go into the Hall of Fame. I talked to Christy Martin a couple of years ago, and now, women's boxing is finally starting to get recognized, in the Hall of Fame. Obviously Eileen Eaton was a trailblazer ahead of her time as a promoter at the Olympic Auditorium and so forth. But it seems like, up until the last few years, the new class with Christy Martin, Layla Ali, and all these people. But Christy, and you've alluded to it as well, just the sexism and just being a woman. And it's like, that's an extra battle you're fighting, just to try to even stay in the sport. Can you talk to that a little bit? And just, you must have some war wounds, that you've gotten through.
Oh, I love Christy. She's one of my good friends. I've known Christy since I got in the business, well, not back all that long, but I'd say maybe 30, no, more than that, probably 89 or 90. We always talk about how far back we go. She was Christy Salters then. She wasn't even married. So we go back a long way. And it's nice to see women publicists. I mean, I got the Eileen Eaton Award from the World Boxing Hall of Fame, which meant a lot to me. There was no Me Too movement when I started. So I just had to deal with, the innuendos and the, I don't even know how to describe, but, the old boys club. And, some of them gave me a hard time, but I'm a tough girl and never stopped me. I knew how to handle myself. I wouldn't be around 45 years later if I didn't. But there's been a lot of women that have come and gone over the years. They thought this was going to be great and they'd love it. And, they got chased out. They couldn't take the heat. And I understand that. But as far as my career, I just keep going along, doing my thing. I don't let anything bother me. A lot of the guys that gave me a hard time became my friends, and I won them over, and that's important. And, for me, it's been pretty easy sailing the last 40 years or so. And, I'm going to keep doing this as long as I can, as long as I still have a brain and can climb in the ring, I'm going to keep doing it. And I hope I keep finding good talent like Mike Quan Williams and like James Toney. And I have a kid here in Detroit, Samuel Rizzo, who's doing well. And I just have a passion for that. And I think anything you do that you have a passion for, it's not like working. It's just something that you get up every day and you want to do it because you love doing it. And I have a love not just for the sport of boxing, but the trainers that I work with, the promoters that I work with. Here in town, I work with Dimitri Salita. I work with Carlos Linas. Mike Quan is with Lou DiBella. And I worked with Bob Arum for years. I worked with Don King. And I've been so blessed because I have great relationships with all of them. And that's what makes me love the sport so much, that I found my spot and I'm accepted and I fit in now. And of course, getting this Hall of Fame just is like frosting on the cake.
Yeah, and you said it earlier, the burning bridges, which is kind of a common thread, it seems like, in boxing. And there's so many great people, like you described, but there's sometimes that burning of bridges, right? And even though it's a global sport, boxing's a small world. And yeah, I've seen so many people just from a local level in Dallas-Fort Worth, everyone's coming in, trying to get into the sport to make a quick buck, or they think they have the magic touch, and and it's not quite that easy. It's like no other. I always tell people, you don't go into an HR department and apply for a job. You just, like kind of like with me, you just kind of meet someone or something happens. And I met Richard Still at the Golden Nugget when he was a pit boss at 2 a.m. on a road trip from San Diego. And that was when I first met him. And then it was years later that I got reconnected with him, and you just never know. But it's interesting. It's all about relationships.
Isn't everything about relationships? Yeah. I always say it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah. For sure. Well, let's end it with this, Jackie. You got till June. What's the weekend? 9th to the 12th. I know you're super busy outside of boxing. You're producing a movie. If you want to plug that a little bit.
I just finished my second movie that I co-produced. This one's called Patch, and it is actually a boxing movie. And it'll probably be on Netflix, Hulu, and all of that within this year. And I love doing that. It turned out to be something I found I really liked. And I've been doing motivational speaking for years. And I really love talking to a group of people, especially if it's women. And if I can motivate and inspire them to go out and do things that they might not normally think they can do, then that's a really big thing in my life, to be able to to entertain them and also motivate them. I really love doing that. And, I've got a few other things that I'm working on that I'm excited about. And you know what? I think the secret to staying happy is to always do the things you love. If you're lucky enough to do the things that you're passionate about, like I said, then every day is a good day.
And I'm going to plug your movie Against the Ropes, starring Meg Ryan. That was based on your life in boxing. For those that will see this, maybe they can go back and watch that movie if they haven't seen it. But it's a classic. So you got till June. You know, how hard is it though, now that you know you're going in to wait the next 6 months to get that induction?
Well, it's really 5 now.
5.
So
Who's counting, right?
not that I'm counting, right? I'm a patient person, so it'll happen when it happens. And I'm enjoying doing these podcasts. Like, I was so thrilled to be talking to you. I thought, oh, this is great. We can talk again. And just to be able to tell my story, hopefully there's someone out there who feels like a fish out of water, who maybe feels that they're an anomaly in the sport or the world they're in, to let them know that, you know, you can do what you want to do. Make a goal, set a goal, and shoot for the stars. If you don't get to the stars, you get close enough. But, you know, go for it, because you don't want to have regrets later. I could have, I should have. Just go for it. And that's what I did. And you're going to have some adversity and some bumps in the road. We all know that. But just suck it up, be strong, and you know, stay with what you want to do. That's what I did. And the next 5 months, I'm sure they'll go quickly. And I picture right now, I'm thinking about, what am I going to say? You know, that's my next thing, is we all have to give a speech, you know.
Right.
So I'll be thinking about what mine's going to be and who am I going to thank. There's so many. And it's just going to be a wonderful time to have my friends and family there with me. And hopefully there's always a fight the night before.
Right.
And hopefully my quad will fight on that card. So that'll make the weekend extra special. And you know what? I'm just thrilled about it. And I'm going to use the next 5 months to work on a speech.
I don't think you'll have any problems with that, Jackie, but it's great to see you here. It's great to talk to you again. I had all these, you know, questions. We covered so much stuff. I can just talk to you. I don't even need questions really, because, you know, you're just so easy to talk to about the sport we both love. And like I said last time, you know, my hope was the next time would be you're going into the Hall of Fame. Well, you're going into the Hall of Fame, class of 2024. It's a great class. It's kind of eclectic in a way. You know, a lot of different guys, maybe overlooked guys too, to some degree. Even, you know, it took a while for James Toney for whatever reason, but these guys that are going in, I mean, you don't hear them every day, and it's nice to see them get recognized like yourself. And you're a trailblazer. You're one of the greats in boxing, men or women. So I'm glad you're getting your just due.
Thank you, Jeff. I always love talking to you. As soon as I knew we were going to do this, you know, it was like, well, when would you like to do it? I said, tomorrow, because I enjoy talking to you. Your questions are always right on, and talk about easy to talk to. You know, you make it great. So thank you so much. And are you going to be at the Hall of Fame?
You know, as we've been talking, I would love to be there. I've only been there once when Richard got in 2014. This would be the 10-year anniversary. I have to talk to my wife because our anniversary is on June 9th. But we'll see. I might have to come back out for it.
Oh, I'd love to see you there. That would be awesome. But thank you so much for another fascinating interview, another wonderful time spent talking about our favorite subject, boxing. And it was a real pleasure.
Jackie, thanks so much. And we're going to do this. If not right before, we'll do it soon after. And if I don't see you there live.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks.